Hi friends and family. Today we are going to talk about how to draft your fantasy football team because draft day is almost here. Alright, so what is the draft? Basically that's when you and all the other players in your league get together either in person, like you're all sitting in the same room together, or via the internet, and you each take turns selecting a player that's going to be on your fantasy football team. When the draft is over, you will have a team that looks something like this. Bringing back this fancy prop. I just want to point out that your team is going to be the nice computerized version of this. It's not going to look like a 3-year-old drew it. So basically when you're finished, you're going to have a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end. You'll have somebody in your flex position, which can be a wide receiver, a running back, or a tight end. You will have selected a defense, a kicker, and 7 players to sit on your bench. I think if you play on Yahoo, it's 6 players on your bench. But who are those players on your bench? Basically, they're going to be mainly running backs and wide receivers. So why do you need so many of those guys? Several reasons, one of which is that there's 2 of each position in your starting lineup. So therefore it makes sense that you would need more backups of those. The other reason is because those guys get injured a lot. So your running backs and your wide receivers get injured all the time, and it really helps to have good quality people at that position sitting and waiting on your bench. Also, sometimes on your bench, some people like to draft a backup quarterback. About half the people who play fantasy football do that. You don't have to, but if you're more comfortable having a backup on your bench, by all means, go ahead and do it. Some people draft a backup tight end also for their bench. And while I'm not going to be mad at you if you do that, you really don't have to. There's going to be tight ends available that aren't owned by anyone in your league should the situation arise where you need a backup tight end. Like I said, if you're more comfortable having a backup tight end on your bench, by all means doing it. But everyone else on your bench, running backs and wide receivers, you want to draft only one defense. You don't want a defense back here on your bench. And you're going to draft just one kicker. You don't want to draft a backup kicker. You don't want to waste valuable bench positions with positions like that you can just pick up, decent ones should the need arise from the pool of players that are unowned. So, yeah, on your bench, mostly running backs and wide receivers, maybe one quarterback, maybe one tight end. That's it. All right. How do you select those players? If you know stuff about football already, you know who the really great running backs are, who the best quarterbacks are, etc. By all means, use your knowledge to help guide your decision making. But what do you do if you're a person like I was the first year I started playing fantasy football and you don't know one single thing about football? Well, don't worry, because the internet has made it really easy for people like you and like I was to draft a very good fantasy football team. So how does that happen? Before we get into that, I'm just going to say that there's a million ways to draft. There's a lot of different philosophies on how to draft a good team. There are dozens of experts out there, all with their own ideas and their own plans, and I'm definitely not trying to say that this is the be-all and end-all. This is a nice, simple way to draft yourself a good quality team if you have no prior knowledge of fantasy football or of football in general at all. All right. So whatever website your league is using as a host is going to have experts on staff who will create ranks. And the ranks would be all the players that are available in the NFL ranked in order of the potential value that they could bring to your fantasy football team. If you are drafting in person, you're going to have to print out that list and bring it with you to guide your decision making. But if you're drafting online, that list is going to be right there on the same page with you while you're drafting. And you'll be able to see in real time which players are still available, who the top ranked player is, even break down the list and see who the top ranked player at each position is. So that information is going to be available for you, and if you don't know anything about football, I definitely suggest you use it. Alright, so you might be thinking, well, what do I do then? Just draft the whoever's at the top of the list? No. Because you still have to end up with a team that looks like this. You still want your bench to be comprised mainly of running backs and wide receivers, and your computer doesn't know anything about that. So it's your responsibility to make sure you fill all your positions and to make sure your bench is comprised of the players that you want. So if you know you need, let's say, a tight end, but the tight end is not at the top of the list, you're either going to scroll down to find the highest ranked tight end, or you can, there's usually a little click drop down menu. You can select tight end and you can see the available players ranked. You're going to select the best available player. So that's the kind of thing that you have to guide yourself. For the first couple rounds, you can probably follow the ranks as they come to you. Basically, running backs are generally ranked the highest. So of the first round, which will be the top 10 ranked players, most of them are going to be running backs. So chances are you're going to draft a running back in your first round. Your second round, maybe you'll select another running back. Maybe you'll go wide receiver in your second round. You're just going to see what the top ranked player is. Sometimes, once in a while, in those first couple rounds, a quarterback or a tight end might come to you, and those, they might be at the top of the list when it's your turn to draft, and those, that would be because that particular quarterback or that particular tight end is considered an elite player in their position, and so the potential for them to bring a lot of value at that position to your team is very high, and so it's okay to select them in those early rounds, just knowing that because you need so many wide receivers and running backs, you're really going to focus on them for the next few rounds. So generally the philosophy is with running backs and wide receivers early and often in the first several rounds. Even if you go 6 or 7 rounds and just draft running backs and wide receivers, that's okay. Sometime around the 6th, 7th, 8th round, you're going to start thinking about drafting a quarterback if you haven't already, drafting a tight end if you haven't already, but then you're just going to continue drafting running backs and wide receivers all the way until the last 2 rounds. So with ESPN, through round 14, you're going to have every position full, including your bench, except for your defense and your kicker. You're going to wait till the last 2 rounds for that. So round 15, you're going to draft a defense, and round 16, you'll draft a kicker. And like I said, you're selecting those players by whoever is at the top of the list. If it's time for you to select a defense and you don't see a defense at the top of the list, just scroll down and look for a defense. The first defense that you see is going to be the highest ranked defense, and so you can select them. So basically, that's a very simple way that anyone can use to draft a good fantasy football team. If you don't know anything about football, it's definitely how I recommend you do it. If somebody else has another opinion, that's fine. I'm not drawing a line in the sand here, just offering a little suggestion for how somebody who doesn't know anything about drafting a team can draft a really good fantasy football team. If there's anything I said to you that's not clear, or you're like, I have no idea what she's talking about selecting players on the website, the next video in this series is going to show an actual draft. So you're going to go through an actual draft with me, and you'll be able to see everything that I've been talking about. 2 things I want to mention. One is that there's a lot of different methods for drafting, or there's several different methods for drafting. The one we're using in our league is the snake draft, and basically that means players 1 through 10, so player 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the league. The computer is going to randomly generate a draft order. So whoever is in position 1 is going to select their first player first. Then position 2 will select their first player. Then position 3 will select their first player. So on and so on until you get to position 10. Position 10 selects their first player, and that's round 1. Then when round 2 begins, position 10 is going to go first in selecting their second player. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. You get it. It looks like a snake. So the reason I'm mentioning it is because if you're position 1 or you're position 10, you're going to have to go twice in a row. And it's just something you need to be aware of. And then the last thing I want to mention is that if any of this seems confusing or intimidating to you, whichever website you're drafting on has something called a mock draft. And all that is a pretend draft. It doesn't mean anything and there's no consequence. You just go, sign up for the mock draft, and then it'll start and you'll be able to draft your team exactly as we just discussed. Then at the end of the draft, your team goes away. It's just a practice run so you can get used to the mechanics of drafting and used to the way that you're going to have to think about getting different players to fill the different positions in your team. So I wanted to mention that. All right, like I said, next video in the series is going to be a live demo of a mock draft, and so you'll get to see how everything I've been talking about works, and hopefully anything that's unclear will become clear to you in the next video. So I'll see you over there.